right up between the dust cloud, and when it finally settled, it rained groundhogs for 10 hours. You know the story of the Illinois farmer and the Iowa farmer and the Missouri farmer. And they died the same day. So to save energy, they decided to cremate them all at once. All at the same time. And inside of a half hour, the Illinois farmer and the Iowa farmer were all burnt up. And they looked inside. The Missouri farmer was still sitting up inside. He said, you know, 2 more weeks of this, we won't have a crop this year. If you can laugh at your troubles, it helps a whole lot. Well, here's a song that was kind of humorous, kind of serious at the same time. It was designed to get people to move to Illinois. It was an ad. Carl Sandburg used to sing this. Way down upon the Wabash, such a land was never known. If Adam had crossed over it, this soil he would surely own. He'd say this was the garden that he lived in when he was a boy, and he'd straightway pronounce it Eden in the state of Illinois. So move your family westward, bring all your girls and boys, and cross the Shawnee Ferry to the state of Illinois. Well, she's bounded by the Wabash River, the Mississippi and the lakes. There's milk sick in her rolling hills, in her swamps there's snakes. But these are slight diversions that take not from all of the joys of living in that garden spot called the state of Illinois. So move your family westward, bring all your girls and boys, cross the Shawnee Ferry to the state of Illinois. Rise to wealth and honor in the state of Illinois. Well, the first time I moved out here about 7 years ago from Chicago, you see, don't hold it against me. I grew up in Chicago and then I moved to Illinois. If you know what I mean. I enjoy Chicago, I really do, but last time I was there, I saw a fella siphoning a wino. I'd never seen that before. Secondhand rosé is what it is. Never know what you'll see in Chicago. Way up on the northward, way up near the borderline, a great commercial city, Chicago, you will find. Her men are all like Abelard, and her women, they're like Heloise. They're all honest and virtuous people, 'cause they come from Illinois. So move your family westward, bring all your girls and boys, and rise to wealth and honor in the state of Illinois. Now, my uncle moved to Illinois in a covered wagon. Started a farm in central Illinois. He was a wonderful man, kind of a philosopher. He'd say kind of strange things sometimes. We weren't sure whether to take him seriously or not, but my favorite thing he ever said was, one good turn gets most of the blanket. Well, there was some truth in it, I guess, but we did never know whether to take him seriously. He always had a good-natured contest with his neighbor. They were always trying to see who could grow the largest vegetables. They had wonderful gardens, and they always exaggerated about the big vegetables they could grow. I remember his neighbor came over one time, told him, he said, I'd like to borrow your saw. I need that saw. I've grown a pumpkin that's so big I have to cut it in half to get it in the wagon. And he said, well, you can have that saw if you can get it. It's down in the garden, pinched in a radish. Big vegetables. There's one more verse to this. If I could remember it, then I'd quit telling these stories, you see. As Uncle used to say, when your memory goes, forget it. And we buried him with his head stuck out of the ground. Hammer broke before we got him all the way in. He became his own monument. We just had him bronzed. Put a little plaque on his forehead, took it off his teeth and put it on his forehead. He never did go to the dentist. He wanted to transcend dental medication. It was here the Queen of Sheba came, with Solomon of old. A wagon load of spices, pomegranates and fine gold. When she saw this lovely land, her heart was filled with joy. Straightway she said, I'd like to be a queen in Illinois. So move your family westward, bring all your girls and boys. Cross that Shawnee Ferry to the state of Illinois. Thank you very much. Well, thank you. It's a treat to be here. This is as close to home as I've played in a long while. I've been playing mostly out on the Mississippi River. Tried to drink a glass of river water yesterday, had to use a fork. Everywhere you go in America, you can hear songs that tell real stories about real people. They zero in on special places. Now, you don't hear these songs on the radio very often. You turn on the radio in New York or Putnam County or Orange County, and it's the same music all across the whole nation, really. Just about everywhere you go. And mostly, those songs don't get real specific about real people and real places there. General love songs, because they have to sell to the whole nation, and that's the only way they can, really. Matter of fact, I was just talking to Mr. Mills over there about that. He's a farmer. I'm going to do a song about dairy farming. Dairy farmers don't kowtow to anybody. Utterly amazing people they are. No bull. We've milked this for all it's worth, I think. A friend of mine wrote this song, a fellow named Charlie McGuire. Grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. Well, I start my day in the sun up dark. I'm going down the lane to get the milk cows up. Got a Holstein, a Guernsey, a one-eyed steer, an old brown cow that jumps fences like a deer. The dew is on the ground and my feet are wet. Got a light in my hand and a hat on my head. Going down to pasture to get my herd. They're chewing their cud and looking at the birds. All getting in the cows, shoe 'em in the barn, put 'em in the stench and turn the radio on. Milk 'em all dry, send 'em out again, wait a month on the dairy for the check to come in. Well, get up, you cows, and get 'em on the move. Their udders are swinging like water in balloons. Take 'em to the barn, and they know their place, with the lead one first, and I close the gate. Bring the cart around, I give 'em all some feed. They lick their noses, flap their ears at me. I put on the machine, and it feels so good just to let down the milk like a good cow should. Getting in the cows, shoe 'em in the barn, put 'em in the stench and turn the radio on. Milk 'em all dry, send 'em out again, wait a month on the dairy for the check to come in. Well, the tourist says a cow's face is so fine, I see their back ends most of the time. I work all summer to put hay in the mow. I work all winter just to feed it to the cow. The milking's all done, I got my weather report. Got my day all planned for my job of work. Back to the pasture goes half of my life. I'm going in the house and hug my wife. Getting in the cows, shoe 'em in the barn, put 'em in the stench and turn the radio on. Milk 'em all dry, send 'em out again, wait a month on the dairy for the check to come in. Hard times on the farm, you know. Back in the 1920s, the Dust Bowl hit. The whole southwest part of the country just about turned to dust and blew away. There was a man who wrote a lot of songs about that event. Same man that wrote the song, This Land Is Your Land, which you may have heard of. But a lot of his songs weren't generally known. He wrote over 1,000 of them. His name was Woody Guthrie, Woodrow Wilson Guthrie. He knew how to use humor also. And a lot of times his songs were real serious, but he knew you had to laugh at your troubles or else it wasn't funny. You had to have a sense of humor or else it wasn't funny. He wrote a talking blues about the people that were forced off their farms in Oklahoma, Kansas, Arkansas. What is it they say about Arkansas? In Arkansas, it takes 2 people to eat possum. One has to watch for cars. It's a vivid image. Why'd the chicken cross the road? To prove to the possum it could be done. This is just so I can remember that first line again. See? Back in 1927, I had a little farm and I called it heaven. The prices were up and the rain came down, and I hauled my crops into town, got the money, fed the wife and kids, raised a family. Well, the rain had quit and the winds got high and the black old dust storms filled the sky. I swapped my farm for a Ford machine, filled it full of that gasoline, and I started rocking and rolling, getting out of that dust bowl, heading for California. They called it the Peach Bowl. It was way high up on a mountain road, way high up in those piney woods. I gave that rolling Ford a shove and I thought I would coast as far as I could. I commenced to coasting, picking up speed. Come a hairpin turn, I didn't make it. Well, man alive, I am telling you that the fiddles and the guitars really flew. That Ford took off like a flying squirrel, traveled halfway around this world, scattered wives, children, hammered dulcimers all over the side of that mountain. Well, we finally got to the west coast, broke, so cold and hungry I thought I'd croak. I bummed up a spud or two, and Ma, she fixed us a potato stew, and we poured the kids full of it. It was mighty thin stew, you could read a magazine right through it. Mighty thin kids looked like a tribe of thermometers running around there. Hell, I always did know, always did figure if that stew had been a little bit thinner, some of these politicians might have seen through it too. The cop? What was that? Wasn't me. Was that you? Okay. We've got a two-way conversation going on, by the way. The gentleman running the sound. Can you hear him? Can you hear him? See, there's this little voice in my ear coming out of this microphone over here, this speaker. And I thought the string broke on the fiddle sitting down here, but I guess it was that fellow. Haven't seen him in a long time. He runs a wonderful music place up in Oregon, Illinois, or helps to operate that. Washington Street Mercantile. Now, how do I get out of this song now that you did that to me? Let's see. Well, the cow went dry and the hens won't lay. No place I can borrow. I give the landlord all the news. The rent comes due tomorrow. So pick away on the old banjo. Keep the guitar strumming. Put more water in the soup. There's better times a coming. Thank you. people think I'm just talking to myself, but I'm not. I'm talking to him. Got some other instruments here. This is my case for small instruments. Never know what you'll find in there. It's a clothespin Uncle used to put on my dog's nose. I guess I ought to explain that now. This dog was such a good hunting dog, we had to close one side of his nose so he wouldn't chase two rabbits at one time. So Uncle put that clothespin on the dog's nose. And we forgot to put it on one day, and there were two rabbits holed up in a hollow tree, and the two rabbits came out at the same time, and one went to the right and one went to the left, and the dog didn't know what to do because we had forgot to put the clothespin on. And well, half the dog went after one rabbit and the other half went after the other rabbit. I felt terrible about it. My favorite puppy was in two pieces, so I put him together and tied him up in my shirt, grabbed half in this hand, half in this hand, just stuck him together, and put him in front of the television so Oral Roberts could say a few healing words over him. Figured if that didn't heal him up, nothing could. Left him inside the shirt for about 1.5 years, and he healed up pretty good, and well, I finally decided to open up the shirt, see how he was, and I'd been in such a hurry to put him together. I guess I had put him together wrong. Apparently that's what happened. He had healed with 2 legs up and 2 down. The strangest looking animal you ever saw, but he was twice as good a hunting dog after that, because he would just run on 2 legs till he got tired out and then flip over and run on the other 2. We never did know whether he was coming or going after that. First dog in the history of the world that could bark at both ends, according to my uncle. He always went, birch, birch, birch. The only bark he knew was birch bark, so. Well, I had a little chicken and she wouldn't lay an egg. Poured hot water up and down her leg. The little chicken cried, the little chicken begged. The little chicken laid a hard-boiled egg. Oh, little Willie was a very bad boy, and he pushed his sister into the well. His mother said while drawing water, gee, it's hard to raise a daughter. Thank you. Excuse me. Got a frog in my throat. Yeah, if you can, that'd be great. That'd be maybe a Coca-Cola or something. Greg's well is dry, can't get water. This is one of the simplest little instruments there is, just a piece of metal with a spring on it. And people would build these out of anything they had. You just rest your top teeth on the top bar and your bottom teeth below. There isn't a lot of sound by itself. Your mouth is the amplifier on it. And you breathe in and out. Or move your tongue. And if you put them all together, it comes out a little bit like music. Not like the Chicago Symphony, but it was a lot of fun. That was the main thing. That's what I think you're finding out today, watching the marvelous bands that have been playing today, and the Irish music and the string band music you're going to hear in blues. People had to express themselves, and I'll tell you, they had a lot of fun doing it, playing music. And it sure was better than taking it out on the wife and the kids. If you could take it out on the fiddle or the banjo, it worked out a lot better. Let me try a song that came from Arkansas. Got it from a man named Jimmy Driftwood. This was about, a time when it was a tradition for a girl to go to her father to ask permission to get married. And the conversation might go something like this. Not always what they expected. Father, oh dear father, well I hope that you won't care. I want to wed my lover, oh my lover, John Adair. Daughter, oh dear daughter, you're gonna have to find another. You cannot marry John Adair, 'cause he is your half-brother. Mother, oh dear mother, oh Lord, I am undone. Every boy I love turns out to be my father's son. Daughter, oh dear daughter, go ahead and take your vow. It ain't no sin, 'cause you ain't no kin to your daddy anyhow. That's all there is to it. Thank you. Thanks. Of course, little instruments were a lot of fun because you could just put them in your pocket and take them where you wanted to go. Couldn't do that with a piano. Nose flute is a strange, boring little instrument. You blow air down in there with your nose, call birds with it when you went hunting. Again, it wasn't the Chicago Symphony, but it was fun. And these were invented by the New Crusty Nostrils. You might be familiar with that group.
Do you want this water with or without the radio?
Without.
They had piped in last year.
Greg is a gentleman and a scholar. I'm convinced it's the dust of dry weather. Coming over today, I saw a tree chasing a dog. As long as we're talking about homemade music, I might as well do this right away. Get it over with. You can be a cut-up at parties with these. I learned to play the saw from a gentleman up in Wisconsin called Clarence Massail. Clarence was 80 years old when I met him. He played saw for 60 years of his life. Got to tune it. It's a seesaw. All the saw is a regular old blade bent in such a way that it vibrates correctly and you get a sound like that. You have to put your hand behind it, your thumb in front, and you pull with your fingers, push with your thumb. Go back and forth, you can change the pitch. Now some people used to play with a little hammer and they tap a saw. Others use a bow. This is quite an authentic bow. There's a scientific name for these. It's called a stick, is what it is. And it's got a piece of nylon clothesline on it. get the idea. Thank you. I play for an awful lot of school children. I try to show them there was a time before television, and this is a great example of it. People just worked with it all day long, used it as a tool, and then at night they'd sit down around the fireplace and have a family band. Somebody would play a Jew's harp, somebody would play the nose flute or a mandolin or a banjo or a saw, and it was some of the finest music you'd ever hear. One of my favorite bands is here today. You're going to hear the Allen Street String Band a little later on from down around Springfield. Greg suggested I plug my record. I don't like to push stuff too much, I'll tell you. But as long as I'm out of tune. It's easier to tune a fish. I just had tuna fish for lunch, so I'm thinking about it. Let my banjo to John Hartford yesterday, and you'd think he'd know how to tune, wouldn't you? I have been playing out on the Mississippi River a lot. What a beautiful way to make a living, I'll tell you. I've left some brochures over there in the on the table by the where they were selling the T-shirts earlier on the river trips. And if you want to pick up one of those, you're welcome to. I also left some brochures for the Rockford Folk Music Festival, which is next weekend. Every time I hear the big boat blow, every time I hear the big boat blow, my mind it gets to rambling, my feet are bound to go. Every time I hear the steamboat blow, what does the deep sea say? What does the deep sea say? It moans and it groans, it slashes and it foams, rolls on its weary way. Every day on the Mississippi we go through a couple of locks. One at Lock and Dam 13 at Fulton, Illinois, Clinton, Iowa. There's little birds that nest in the lock gates there. These small little birds come out of the nests and eat moss off the lock walls. They're called the lock moss nesters. Next time you're down there, be sure to look for them. Steamboat, she's coming round the bend. Steamboat, she's coming round the bend. She ain't doing nothing but killing off good men. Oh, the steamboat, she's coming round the bend. Vicksburg is a mighty hilly town. Vicksburg is a mighty hilly town. Well, the Yankees on the river, they sure did blow it down. Vicksburg is a mighty hilly town. Firemen keep her rolling on for me. Make it down to Memphis, Tennessee. My back is getting tired, my shoulder's getting sore. Firemen keep her rolling on for me. What does the deep sea say? Well, the black folks all said that Annie Christmas was black. And the white folks all said Annie Christmas was white. It happened so long ago, Nobody remembers for sure. What they did agree on was that Annie Christmas was just one heck of a woman. She stood 7.5 feet tall in her stocking feet. She weighed 750 pounds. She made her living as a keelboat pilot on the Mississippi, poling those boats up and down. Even sometimes she got over on the Illinois in the days before steam, poling those boats up and down, taking long poles, sticking them in the mud at the bottom of the river, pushing with all her might, muscles just rippling on her arms. People lined the banks for miles and miles to watch Annie work. There wasn't a man Annie couldn't beat in a fight, fair or otherwise. They came from all over to fight Annie, and she won every time she had a fight. Even Mike Fink showed up once to fight her. Mike Fink, who was famous for being a raucous raiser. He tried to jump the Mississippi once, got halfway across, realized he couldn't make it, so he turned around and went back. Sure enough. Well, Annie started seeing those new steamboats that were coming down the Mississippi. They were beautiful. They looked like floating wedding cakes coming down the river in the mist. Just gorgeous things. And she saw those fancy gamblers on board, and she decided she wanted to dress up like those ladies she saw on those steamboats. She went out and she bought herself about 50 yards of red satin, made herself a little mini skirt out of it. And she was some sight. She had a red turkey feather in her hair. She had her new dress on. She had her necklace on. Oh, I didn't tell you about her necklace. Annie's necklace was famous the whole length of the Mississippi. It was made out of ears and noses and eyeballs she'd bit and gouged off of guys in those fights she had. When Annie died, they say that necklace was 28 feet long. Well, she got on board the River Queen, and she met Charlie that night. You might say they fell head over heels in love at first sight, because Annie and Charlie were married a week later, and exactly 1 year after getting married, Annie gave birth to 12 sons, all born at the same time. Within 6 months of being born, they all stood 7.5 feet tall like their mother, weighed 750 pounds each, and you think people lined up before to watch. When that family was working, they were lined up 5, 6, 7 people deep along the shore to watch as they worked past on those towboats that were coming up and down. Well, Charlie played roulette. That's all he did. He was a fancy Dan and a gambler, and he played roulette most of the time, kind of like Wheel of Fortune, kids. I don't know if you know what roulette is. It's like Wheel of Fortune, where you spin the big wheel, and he felt real lucky one day. He said, I'm going to bet on red, and red won, and he said, I think I'm just going to let it ride because I feel so very lucky today. And he rested his weight on his hand on the table, leaned over, put all his weight on that hand. 25 times in a row, red won. No one had ever seen that happen on the Mississippi, where strange things happen all the time. Charlie hadn't said a word. 25 times in a row he won. Finally, the captain came over and said, Charlie, we got to cut you off. You've taken every dollar this boat's got. Annie took Charlie by the other arm to lead him away, and Charlie keeled over, dead as a doornail. Apparently, he'd been dead for quite a while. That riverboat had been losing to a dead man. Oh, strange things happen on the Mississippi. Well, her sons felt terrible about it, and Annie felt terrible, and she pined away and died not long after that. The family built Annie a special coffin. It had a pilot house with a wheel in it, had a big paddle wheel on the back. And on the darkest night of the year, they cut the rope and let it sail out into the Mississippi River. And if you're ever down on those low stretches of the river, and you listen carefully, folks say you can still hear the sounds of Annie Christmas's paddle-wheeled coffin as it splashes by in the nighttime mist. Well, the river always been this rouster's home. The river always been this rouster's home. Gonna sit and watch the big boats, never wanna roam. The river always been this rouster's home. What does the deep sea say? What does the deep sea say? It moans and it groans, it slashes and it foams, rolls on its weary way. Lazy bones sleeping in the sun. How you gonna get your day's work done? How you gonna get it done? All sleeping in the noonday sun. Lazy bones sleeping in the shade. How you gonna get your cornmeal made? How you gonna get it made? Sleeping in the noonday shade. And when your crop needs spraying, I bet you're praying bowls fall off of the vine. When you're fishing, I bet you're wishing the fish don't bite on your line. Lazy bones sleeping all the day, never gonna make a dime that way. Never make a dime that way. You never heard a word that I say. Thank you. Greg, how we doing time-wise?
It's 1:45. We can do a few more.
Okay, got time for a couple more. I'm gonna get my picks on. Stand back up so I can breathe again. Well, the truth is you're all invited out to the Mississippi River. The organization is called River Cruises. They go out of LeClaire, Iowa. And it's a one-day trip up to Chestnut Mountain Lodge near Galena. And then they come back the next day, stay overnight at the lodge. It's a lot of fun. I've been a raftsman, I've been a steamboatman. I've bushwhacked this river by muscle and steam. I can handle the lead line, the spring line, the headline, make those old engines run just like a dream. We'll rant and we'll roar like true-born steamboatmen. We'll rant and we'll roar on deck and below until we see bottom inside the two sinkers. Straight up the channel to Galena we'll go. I went to a dance one night in Old Beardstown. There was plenty of gals there, as fine as you'd wish. There was one pretty maiden, she was chewing tobacco, just like a young kitten that was chewing fresh fish. Oh, we'll rant and we'll roar like true-born steamboatmen. We'll rant and we'll roar on deck and below until we see bottom inside the two sinkers. Straight up the channel to Galena we'll go. must dream of another morning and a time so long ago when the sweet magnolia blossomed and the cotton fields, they were white as snow. Ah, Catfish John, he was a river hobo, and he lived by the river bend. And looking back, I can remember just how good it was to be his friend. And Mama said, don't go near that river, don't be hanging round old Catfish John. But come the morning, I'd always be there, walking in his footsteps in the sweet Delta dawn. He was born a slave near the town of Vicksburg. He'd been traded for a chestnut mare, and looking back, I can remember how his load, it was hard to bear. And Mama said, don't go near that river, don't be hanging round old Catfish John. But come the morning, I'd always be there, walking in his footsteps in the sweet Delta dawn. I like that song a lot. That's a fairly modern song. But I want to end off with one of my favorite old-time songs. I learned this song from an old man who was from the state of Wisconsin. His name was Paul Durst. Paul was 93 years old when I met him. He'd been with the Buffalo Bill Wild West show, been part of the early days of that show, and he said they were responsible for introducing hoof and mouth disease to Europe. Talking to Paul was like stepping into a time machine. He was a fiddler in a country band, a migratory crop worker, hobo. He'd been all over the country riding the rods. Matter of fact, he knew this old hobo song 30 years before Roy Acuff says he wrote it. From the waves of the Atlantic to the wide Pacific shore, from the rocky coast of Oregon to ice-bound Labrador, there's a train of doozy layout, she's quite well known to all. It's the hobo's accommodations called the Wabash Cannonball. Oh, listen to the jingle, to the rumble and the roar, as she glides across the woodlands, through hills and by the shore. You hear the mighty rush of the engine, hear the lonesome hobo's call, as we ride the rods and brake beams on the Wabash Cannonball. You might say Paul was the man who taught me to drink. He gave me my first drink of alcoholic beverage. It was vodka and milk of magnesia. It was called a Phillips screwdriver. Had to be there. This train, she runs through Quincy, Monroe, and Mexico. Heads into Kansas City. Oh, she isn't driving slow. She tears right into Denver, and she makes an awful squall. They all know her by her whistle. It's the Wabash Cannonball. Paul told me once, he said, Art, did you ever know I'd been captured by cannibals? I said, no, Paul, I never did know that. You never told me that. He said, yes, I was captured by cannibals, but lucky for me, they weren't hungry. But they were thirsty, and they'd stab me every so often, fill up a glass and drink it down. Finally, I told them, I'm tired of getting stuck for the drinks. Listen to the jingle, to the rumble and the roar, as she glides across the woodlands, through hills and by the shore. hear the mighty rush of the engine, hear the lonesome hobo's call, as we ride the rods and break beams on the Wabash Cannonball. Paul used to sing this last verse for a fellow he knew, a fellow named Whitey, and they were jumping a freight in the yards at Missoula, Montana in the year 1910, and Whitey slipped and was killed. And Paul always put his name in the last verse to kind of remember him by. Well, here's to Montana Whitey, may his name forever stand, and always be remembered by the boys throughout the land. When his earthly days are over and the curtains round him fall, we'll carry him home to victory on the Wabash Cannonball. Oh, listen to the jingle, to the rumble and the roar, as she glides across the woodlands, through hills and by the shore. And hear the mighty rush of the engine, hear the lonesome hobo's call, as we ride the rods and break beams on the Wabash Cannonball. Thank you so much. Thank you. See you next time. Thanks.